Hi, welcome to Quirky Queen's Journals. My name's Kirsten. So I have taken a cubist approach to this plant that I'm drawing. So I've not took on their style, I've just literally photographed the plant at many different angles, at about 20 different angles, side on, top, and from underneath, and I've used about 8 of those angles in this painting. Now, one of the approaches I have took to this is to actually turn the picture upside down that I'm looking at and the paper I'm drawing on, so that it's easier to see the lines and the shapes, and not so that it's easier to draw what you actually see rather than what you think you see. So this way, your brain's not thinking about, I'm drawing a leaf, how should a leaf look? It's easier to just draw what you see. So I am using a China marker. You could use a pencil, anything. I just like to start with this because it's permanent, and anything wet I put on top, it doesn't affect it. And it also does give me an outline to work with, generally for a couple of layers. So for this first layer, it's just a very, very simple outline sketch. I mean, there's nothing fancy about it at all. I've put the photograph for every single angle that I've used on here, so that you can use it as a reference if you want to. So you can follow along and do this as well. So there's some parts, the big leaves that kind of stand alone are much easier than the sort of grouping of leaves. But just remember, this is the first layer of many. It doesn't need to be fancy. You're literally doing the contours and outline. And also, I've used many, many different types of mediums, and I've listed them. Now, those paints that I have listed are the paints that I use. They're the only paint colours that I'm using. I like to use the indigo, the cadmium red and the cadmium yellow deep hue. I think they work well together. They give you nice greens, they give you nice browns. So I'm just laying down the background. I've cut out a lot of the repetitive, like if I'm painting big areas, then, I've just cut that out because you can see that I'm just doing the big area. That is a gorgeous sunny yellow, isn't it? See the silver and the gold? I just like to add them in because I just think it adds something to the paint colours. I don't know, what it helps to add a bit of translucency. And I just think it makes the colour just a wee bit more mature looking. It almost enhances it. I know that sounds daft, but it does. And I just like to use them in it. This is like a summer's day at this stage. So the purpose of doing this anyway is I am trying to think of different ways to approach abstract painting, because I don't want to just do expressionism all the time where I'm just putting down lines and colours and shapes. I'm kind of starting to see that actually if I use real objects, I actually really try and look at them and try and see the edges and the shapes, etc., and then try and abstract from there. I think that's going to open up more doors in my mind as to what the possibilities are. So for me on this one, it's all about the lines, the edges, and the shapes, and then the forms that they create, how the layers sit together. Now this layer is the only layer really that I've put some shading down, and it's because it's the base layer and I just want it to start off quite, obviously it's not completely realistic. It's certainly not photorealistic, but I wanted it to have some relationship with the original, with the plant. But the layers after here are very much just about the lines and the shapes. Now, I love as well the way that this, see the grouping of the leaves? I actually think this plant's just a composition dream. I think it's grown into a composition all by itself. You don't need to do anything. But, I love this kind of shape that it's making. See if you actually just did that shape as a blank flat area. I think that would be lovely. So in my last video, I did it on a canvas. I did it in a bigger scale. And I really made it all about the leaves and the stalks of the flowers that I was using. But it was very much just one angle. This is layering different angles on top. And what I found with it was so much depth in it, so much more interesting to look at. And it actually made the plant, you're actually shown different aspects of the plant's life. I know it's only from how it looks in a pot, right? But it's something additional to add in. So these water-soluble oil pastels I'm using are, I think it's called Liquid Raw. Now, these are an off-brand set on Amazon, and they're like £8 or £11 for 32. And, I was quite impressed with them. They give good textures, and they do blend to an extent. They still leave the marks that you've originally put down. They don't go away. So here I've used grey and purple and white on top of the yellow vase. And like I say, these layers are the first layers, so these shades will mute down over time and look more blended, I suppose. So we're still at the side-on angle, but we've just turned the plant around slightly. So this is the second layer. And for this one, I broke the China pencil. Fixed it. I'm back in now. For this one, it really is, it was just one layer of paint I put on it. See, when it says I don't want to do abstract expressionism, that was a complete lie. All I want to do is that, but I have absolutely reached a wall where I feel burnt out with it because I don't have enough knowledge, skills, experience, everything, just to be able to just know the whole process from beginning to end. And I feel like I can't do the expressionism part properly because I only know a couple of ways to do it. So I'm determined to learn more ways. And for me, this has been a real breakthrough. I'd went to a live portrait class and it was draw what you see, draw what you see. And honestly, it was amazing. It was so good. I just felt like somebody had given me a wee bit of knowledge that I could just take and then try and work with. Try and see how many different avenues I can go down with it. So this is a slightly darker green than I'd used before. But see the layer that's underneath? That's also given a different shade of green. So you've got a lot going on here now, even though we just literally have put on a layer of colour. Now, I do a layer with a green Posca pen, and I have not put it on to the video, but I have put the plant angle on. I literally just drew the outline of the plant. There it is there. I've done another layer. I'm going to tell you what it is in a minute. And then we're going to go on to the white Posca pen. So the green, you can see the green. Oh, and I did one with an intense green as well. So literally just drawn the outlines of the plants. So this is us now on to our 5th layer. So this is the 5th plant. And we try another angle here as well, which I think really added to the picture and kind of was another way of thinking. Basically, I do all the outline in the white with the white Posca pen. And then I colour it in with the white. And then I'm actually going to merge it in with the background. And that gives another dimension to it of just the way it looks. It's incredible. I feel like how a magician must feel when they learn a secret. Because for me, that's what this week's been like ever since I went to that class and somebody said, draw what you see. I have used different mediums as well, and it's not necessary to do so. You could approach this by changing whether you fill it in or not. You know, whether you just do an outline, whether you just do a block shape. You know, there's many, many, many ways you could approach this. I have approached it trying to use different mediums, just more as a kind of learning experience. And I suppose using the different mediums does help you separate it out a bit, because you can look at it visually and you can see just by the texture of it, you know, what you've done. But I will be trying this with many, many, many different, you know, different ways to differentiate the layers without, and some ways it might be more subtle where I just use different shades of green of the same paint colour. So I do this red water-soluble oil pastel. Just an outline. Then I go over it with the water just to, so that I've still got the outline, but it's got a sort of watery red rim round it. And then I go back into the white plant layer, and that's where the magic happens. I think that's where the magic happens anyway. I'm really into bringing the background into the what's going on. I did that in the last video as well. I think there's something in there that helps add harmony, but also abstraction, because you're kind of creating the shapes of the object and mixing it in with the background. See, I made a schoolboy error here. I've turned the picture round the correct way. Luckily, I was only putting the water on though. So this is where I'm starting to fill in the white shapes with the blue. Oh, my blue's all different shades of blue. I'm not overly bothered about that just now. So where I think that this really see the green Posca pen, the red water-soluble oil pastel, these outlines that have not been filled in, I think they, with this added into the background, I think the mixture of the lot really makes this plant look alive. It adds a kind of, you know, the way that plants have quite flexible stalks and their leaves go in different directions. Well, I think this emphasises it. So yeah, at the last layer that I put on of the background, I kind of come up with a more consistent blue, let's just say. So at this stage, I've not started filling in the outline areas, but I do go back in and you'll see, because I've left it in the video. This is quite a long section, so anything that's just background, I've kind of sort of cut some of that out, but all the filling in of the wee shapes I've kept. I think this is an important stage because I think this is this is where I just felt like doing the layers of the different angles, but then taking this other sort of different. I suppose this is a different angle as well, because we're almost making one layer look like that's the background coming through. So that's actually changing the shape of the other layers that are there. Now this makes sense to me. I hope it makes sense to you, what I'm saying. See, you can see it. So even though that's the background now, it's still got the shape of the plant. I'm quite excited by this. I don't know if you can tell. I'm sure I'm not making it too obvious. I like as well the red water-soluble oil pastel is merging in with the blue a bit, and it's just adding some depth to the background blue, I think. It's giving different tones in it. So you can see the bits of outline that are left in the background. And I just think that they make the plant look... They're subtle. They're not overshadowing other aspects of the plant, but they're making the plant look bigger, more interesting, busier. You know, plants have lots of different textures. They've got all their veins. They've got their edges can be, you know, smooth, or they can be a bit curly. And I just think all that adds into it. I just think it's beautiful. Now, I think this is the last side view. And I'm using Sennelier chalk pastel in, I'm going to call it dark green. I'm not sure what the shade was. Now, I've never been able to use this soft pastel properly. The others are very easy to use. This green only seems to work on top of like rough paint, gesso. But I'm persevering with it because it's a lovely shade of green, and also it's actually ripping through the paint layers, which is brilliant because that in itself just looks amazing. But later on, I use red paint, and that dark green soft pastel mixed in with that red paint it's beautiful. This isn't the last side layer, this is the first top layer, because see the vase, now the vase is at a different angle, and that's what I've just drawn in there. And also the way that the perspective of the leaves are now overhanging the vase as well. So yeah, I don't know whether it's the pigment that's in that green pastel or whatever, but at the end of the day, in this circumstance, it did great things to the picture. But I'm going over it with an off-brand chalk pastel. So I'm using A3 300 GSM watercolour paper with a layer of gesso on top before I've started putting on my paint, etc. I'm looking at this and I'm thinking there's no way I would have been able to create something like this just as without it having come in different layers. It's almost like doing different drawings on top of each other. I'm really excited to find out what I do to that green layer. Do I leave it alone? Do I add something to it? Oh, I'll leave it alone. So this red layer, this mixes in with that dark green Sennelier soft pastel beautifully. And I use the red paint to do both the outline and the filling in. Do you know, it looks so complex. I mean, if I was just given that picture and told to do it, I'd be a little bit scared. But it's actually made up of very, 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 very simple layers. Obviously, I dry them in between. I'm really excited for you to see this red. It's like a wine red. And it's like a shade of red that some plants actually have. Do you know, I think there's movement in this, and there's... Do you know the way you can look at something straight on and you know that there's other stuff going on around it? I think you can tell that the back of this object is different to the front. Does that make sense? You can tell this is a 3D object by looking at it. Whereas sometimes, often, when I paint something, it does look very flat. So I think I did 5 or 6 side angles, 1 or 2 top angles, and I've done 1 underneath angle, which is the next one. And it'd be interesting as well to kind of vary, you know, the different angles, so you could maybe just have one side and the rest all the bottom or whatever. And also the order that we put them on as well. I actually really loved how this looked at this stage because I put a picture on of it. So this is us, no, we're just finishing that one off. Isn't that fabulous? So this is the underneath view, and I'm going to use the oil pastels. Probably would leave the oil pastels towards the last layer because it's hard to use other mediums over the top of them. So the perspective of this vase has changed again. So it's went from being... Oh, I can't remember what the difference between concave and convex is. I think it's went from convex to concave. It's changed. And this is a beautiful oil pastel colour. It's light olive green and it's by Mungayo. I've had these oil pastels ever since I started painting. These oil pastels must be 3 years old. More than. And you know, the plant, the leaves sit so differently. And even in the pot themselves, with the different angles, where the stalks sit in the mud in the pot changes as well. It actually makes you think, it's made me think a lot more about, so if if I was to do that first layer again, I feel like I have more knowledge about what I should be looking for because of the changes that I've picked up doing these different angles. So really anybody that's, I would recommend this to anybody to try. I think it's, I think you'll learn a lot from it. I don't think it takes that much time. You don't need to be brilliant at the drawing aspect of it, because the complexity and the kind of the depth in it comes from the layering. I'm going to be doing this so much. As well, you can see because the angle has changed and this is the first underneath layer, I'm actually drawing a lot slower because I can't predict what the leaves are going to look like. That's my hand in the top right corner. So I am going to fill in the leaves, and I put some of that Lindy's Starburst mica spray down, but it doesn't really, it kind of faded away. So I use quinacridone gold high flow acrylic, and I add in some phthalo green high flow acrylic as well. And I'm basically just I'm sort of doing the dark side of the leaf and the light side of the leaf, basically, within the oil pastel outline. Just to sort of take a wee different approach on this layer. And because this is the last one, and I add in a table, and I use the quinacridone gold to glaze over that as well, just to bring the plant and the table together. You'll see that at the end. We're nearly done. I think there's only a couple of minutes to go. Because after this, what I do is I go over the background again. I try and get a more consistent blue. I do all my, inside, like there. In the wee bits. I put some background through the plant again. I fill in those little bits again. I maybe could have done with a bit more background in the plant. I don't know. I was really happy with this. I was really happy with the approach that I took, the process itself. I mean, it's made me feel, when you feel a bit burnt out from it and you're like, I don't know what to do next. I'm fed up doing the same things. Why am I doing the same things? Well, I feel like this has cured me of that for just now. So this is it, just about finished. And just what I say, I really hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. And thanks very much for watching. And I hope to see you soon. And take care. Cheerio.